Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Grayboardgamer here with a playthrough of Lobotomy. This is a game that I've wanted to play for a while. I missed out on the Kickstarter, but I've been able to get my hands on a copy, and I've had fun playing it and wanted to do a playthrough series for it. Before we open the box and get set up, let's read a little bit of background on the game. In this game, players are patients that are trying to escape a psychiatric hospital together. This adventure has elements of survival horror, dungeon crawling, and role-playing. Everyone becomes a twisted character with a set of reality-bending disorders. We see the staff as horrifying abominations and common objects as magical artifacts. You've prepared an escape plan, but even trivial tasks seem like out-of-this-world missions. Hopefully you'll find a way to use that to your advantage. Otherwise, the chief hospital administrator will finish his rounds and strap you back to your beds. Are you really escaping the lobotomy? Or are you this way because it has already happened? Lobotomy is a cooperative game for 1 to 5 players, and I'm going to play this solo, but I'm going to be a little overly ambitious and do this as a 5-player game. That means I'm opening myself up for a lot of mistakes because there's going to be a lot for me to keep track of. But I figured if I'm going to do it, might as well go all out. My 5 characters will be playing together as a team. We're trying to achieve our goals together. Either we win as a group or we lose the game as a group. The first thing we do is select our scenario. I've shuffled the scenario deck and have it here ready to draw the first one. The reason you want to do this first is some scenarios call for specific board tiles to be placed. And if you create your board before you select your scenario, you might have to take it apart and find the one that you need. The game's difficulty is set by the number of scenarios that you need to complete in order to win the game. If you choose to only do 1 scenario, that's the beginner level. If you choose 2 scenarios, that is the normal difficulty. 3 scenarios is listed as crazy hard, and 4 scenarios as insanely impossible. I don't want to go insanely impossible, but I want to step it up a little bit from normal. So we'll say this will be a 3 scenario game, and that's going to make the game last quite a while. So there'll be a lot of videos in this series. So we're going to do the 3 scenario crazy hard difficulty level. We will only see our first scenario initially, and we'll see other scenarios as the gameplay progresses. So the first scenario we're going to get is Dreamworld. The objective of Dreamworld is to defeat the slashers in the Dreamworld. And then we see where it says next scenario trigger when there is 1 slasher left. I read through the scenario in the instruction booklet, and you start with 3 slashers on the board. So after we've defeated 2 of them and there's only 1 remaining, then the next scenario will trigger, which means we will draw the next card in this scenario deck. You also see these 3 stars, green, red, and blue. And when we do the monster movement cards, if we have a green, red, or blue star on there, that means that this card will activate a surge, which is also described in the scenario section of the rulebook. All this will make much more sense in the context of the gameplay. Also, once we get the board set up and get the slashers out there, I'll go over the specifics for the Dreamworld scenario in much more detail. We need to set up the game board, which you have this square central tile. It's the same on both sides. And you can see we have A, B, C, and D. That represents the 4 quarters of the board. And there's this stack of 10 double-sided room tiles, or not just rooms, but quarter tiles. And we'll randomly select them and randomly select the side, and we'll place it around the 4 corners here to create this large game board. The random quarters have been put in place, and what we ended up with is the storeroom number 3 tile, the chapel, the entrance, and the water tower. I've shuffled and prepared all of the decks for the game. Up top we have the mental disorder cards, schizophrenia, phobias, anxiety, neurosis, aggression, and OCD. Down here we have inventory cards, weapons, equipment, and medications. Here we have the movement cards for the monsters throughout the game, and the rest of our scenario cards are over here. I left this space right here for the discard for the movement pile. Here we have what the players refer to as the Warden, which is how they see the hospital administrator. They see him as this hulking beast carrying a patient around by their neck, or by the back of their head, really. But this big guy will be referred to as the Warden throughout the gameplay. The first thing we need to do is place the Warden in his starting position on the board. The Warden starts in quadrant A, and you can see these numbers on the spaces marked throughout the quadrant: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, all the way up through 12. The Warden will start on space number 1 in quadrant A. Those numbers are what's referred to as the insomnia track, and the Warden will move from number to number throughout the gameplay. Hopefully we never interact directly with the Warden, because it always ends badly for the players. They end up getting hurt really bad. We need to stay out of the Warden's way. And when the Warden does move, he'll follow the numbers from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on, until it reaches 12. When it reaches 12 on A, the next move would be right over here on B1. And then it would follow through quadrant B, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. And then it would keep doing that until it reached C12. Because we are playing 3 scenarios, the Warden will move through 3 quarters on the board. This acts as our timer. That lets us know how much time we have left to complete what we need to do. If the Warden reaches C12 in this 3 scenario game, the scenarios become irrelevant. We can still complete them if we want to, but completing them won't win the game for us. We have to hunt down and kill the Warden in order to win at that point, which is extremely difficult to do. So our group of patients will want to complete all 3 scenarios before the Warden reaches C12. And again, that's because this is a 3 scenario game. If this was only 2 scenarios in normal level, it would end when he got to B12, 1 scenario, A12, and if we were playing Insane, it would come all the way over here to D12. The next thing we will do is put in all of the doors and cabinets. I'm going to show you how the game lays out for you to do this in the rule book, and then I'll show you how I do it. I just zoomed in on a couple of rooms to show you the example. You can kind of see this ghostly highlight image around this set of cabinets, this rectangle shape here. That lets you know that you need to place one of these cabinets down. It doesn't matter if you use the filing cabinet or the bookcase one. It's going to be random, and they just include 2 different ones for just variety. So you would normally place it on the game board like that in the spots that are designated. That way if you encounter it during the game, you can flip it over and then follow the directions and do what it says in order to maybe gain some items or encounter a monster. These go all over the board, and I found that with a lot of miniatures, especially if they're in the rooms that are small like this with the cabinets, it's really difficult for them to stand in there. You either have to put them on top of it, but if you have more than one miniature, they're kind of leaning half on, half off. And when you do go to move them, you bump it, and that knocks them off. The same thing goes for the doors. You can kind of barely see it. It might not show up on camera, but there is this ghostly haze around it, just like this here. It has the same thing around the doors. Let me see if I can zoom in a little closer. That's about as close as I can get with my camera without blurring it out completely, but you can kind of see that ghostly image around that door also. That means you should place a door token there. These are the door tokens. They have the door on one side and then something on the back. It's either going to be a barricade, a lock, or just blank. And what you would do is place the token there face down random. That way when you do encounter it, You can flip it over and there it goes. You can see what you need to do. In this case, it would be a barricade of 2 that we need to deal with. What I choose to do is not put the cabinet ones down, and then I put them all in a bag to draw from. Because when I'm playing, I can see this outline, so I know there's one there available for me to search. And then at that time, when I do search it, I draw one from the bag, and then I'll put it on the board. And if I see it on the board, I know that I've searched there. That way, instead of the whole board being full of the tokens that are easy to bump and move around and might have a hard time with miniatures, they're only in the spots where you search. And then once the encounter's over, I would just turn it over to its side like that, just so it looks nicer on the board. And that means that I have searched there and encountered it, and that's it. No one else can do that searching action there. Because normally what happens is you would encounter this, flip it, have your encounter, then take it off the board and it's gone forever. I do it the opposite way. I leave them off until we encounter it. That way it's a little bit easier to move around. And my version of the game came with these door standees that I choose to use in place of the door tokens, and I just put the door tokens in a cup to draw from. Not that these doors make it any easier, but I just like the way they look once they're all set up and you have all the doors on the board. It's a lot nicer, easier to see which locations you have not gone in. Once you get a door and it's open, then you can just remove this like you would remove the token, and then it would be open for everybody. But I'll go ahead and place the doors all around the board on these locations with this hazy mark on them. Before I put the doors up, you can see here at these double doors, there's no like hazy marking around them to let you know to place a door down. Those doors are already open. You'll find a couple of those in places throughout the board, but for the most part, all the doors are locked or have a token on them to start the game, with the exception being doors like this that have no marking on them, just like the solitary confinement cells that we start at the beginning of the game. They will not have any marks on them, so you won't place any doors there. We have all of the doors in place, and I think I have them all correct. If we encounter something along the way where there should have been a door, then we'll go ahead and put it in at that time. If we look at the board a little closer and determine one should have gone there, but I think I have them all right. Or if we go to move a door and we realize that one should not have been there, we'll deal with that when that comes up. Again, I didn't put out all of the cabinet tokens. That way there's less going on, less to bump around. Next we have a group of body tokens, and there's a total of 10, I think, 5 of each style, and the style is just there for variety. It doesn't mean anything. So we're going to shuffle these up into a random pile. I randomized them over here. Turns out there's 4 of each, and we're going to place one on the pentagram here in the middle of the board. Just grab one and put it face down right there on that space. And then we're going to place one body in each quarter of the board on one of the highlighted spaces. What you would do is you would pick one of the cabinets, take the cabinet off and put the body in its place. Since we don't have any cabinets that are on the board, I will look and see how many cabinet spaces are in each quarter, and I'll roll a die and randomly place the bodies. We have one body per quarter now. We have one right there. Another way up here at the top, you'll see it right there. This one is down here behind the counter. And then our fourth one, or our fifth one, our fourth quarter is here inside this locked room. And I put the rest of them up here in case we need them during the game. Next we will randomize 2 memory tokens into each quarter of the board. And in order to randomize, each quarter has 12 spaces. So we'll roll a 12-sided dice twice for each quarter, and that's the location of each memory token. If we didn't have specific directions and we had to randomize completely, we'd also roll a 4-sided die along with it. That would give us A, B, C, or D, or 1, 2, 3, or 4, which quarter we were going to go into. But in this case, we know that we need 2 memory tokens in each one. So we'll just start with A and move in a clockwise direction to B, C, and D. I'm using my own dice for this playthrough, not the dice that came with the game, except for the custom ones that have to be. So for Quadrant A, we have 5 and 11. We will get a memory token here at 5 and then one at 11. B, 2, and 8. There's 2 and 8 is right there. Quadrant C ended up in 3 and 11. And quadrant D, we have them in 4 and 12. Next, in each quarter, we will randomize one mental patient and one scavenger. In a 5-player game, you randomize 4 nurses, and there cannot be more than one nurse per quadrant, which means we have 4 quadrants, so we're going to put one in each. So we will randomize in each quarter a mental patient, a scavenger, and a nurse. Take a quick look at these guys. These are the mental patients. They're in their straitjackets. And the first time each one of these activate, we'll take a look at their monster card in a little more in depth. We're starting with quadrant A, so this mental patient will go in 10, which will place him right there. Next we have our super thin, gaunt scavengers, zombie-like. We'll get one of these in each quadrant or quarter also. This particular scavenger is going to 5. 5 is the same location as our memory token. And finally, we're going to get our nurse in quadrant A. And she's coming in at 2. And that will place her in the space right next to the Warden. I randomized the remaining monsters. Over here in B we have a mental patient and a nurse, and then way up there is the scavenger. Down here in C, our scavenger and mental patient are lurking outside the entrance, and the nurse looks like she's back here in the dining area. And finally in D here, we have a mental patient and a nurse, and it looks like a room with some beds. And way over here in the water tower area, we have our scavenger. Now we will go over and set up our beginning scenario here, Dreamworld. And we talked about slashers on that card. We need to randomize 3 slashers onto the board. Here's a look at our slasher with the trench coat and hat. And the game has 3 of these minis, so we're going to randomize 3 of them. And these are going to be completely randomized. So we will roll the 4-sided die also to choose the quarter, but the scenario stipulates that you can have no more than 1 per quarter. So if we roll the same quarter where a slasher already is, we will re-roll. We're going to need our 12-sided, and I have my triple 4. I want to use that instead of the triangular 4-sided. And that is a 4, so that's going to be in quarter D or delta. And that 3 is kind of leaning, but it would have went down that way. So D3, which means our first slasher is here in the same space as our nurse. Next slasher will go in B Bravo 1. And we'll place it here in this room. And our third and final slasher needs to go in either A or C. And that is B again. We'll keep the number 6. And we'll keep rolling until we get a 1 or a 3. There's a 1, so A6. Placing our third slasher here in 6. Our goal for the Dreamworld scenario, again, is to defeat the slashers in the Dreamworld. So we need to defeat all 3 of them. And the next scenario will trigger when there's only 1 slasher remaining. And that means that you can have 2 or 3 active scenarios going at the same time, which can make things extremely hard. So you want to try and manage that also. Here are the rules for the Dreamworld scenario. The slashers exist in the Dreamworld. They cannot be attacked or affected normally, and they do not move unless the characters are in the Dreamworld too. To enter the Dreamworld, the character has to pay 1 action point. If they do, put a marker on their space. The character is now asleep, and their real body remains on the space with the marker. Further movement with the character's miniature in the Dreamworld means leaving the body behind. The monsters in the real world will still see the body, move towards it, and attack it. A sleeping body has 0 defense, and monsters always attack it first, even if there are other characters on the same space. The character's mind, represented by his miniature moving in the dream world, ignores all monsters, characters, doors, and items in the real world, but still does not ignore walls. The only thing you can interact with are the slashers, and the slashers only see you. If a character is in the dream world, the slashers start to move towards them. The characters can still fight, use skills, and heal in the dream world, but cannot use skills that would affect the body. At any moment, a character can return to their body from any space in the dream world by spending 1 action point and passing an imagination test. Failing this test makes all further imagination tests made by this character during this turn harder. Here's our slasher card, and they have 6 health each, so they're tough. And then they have their special skills here of Elite, Runner, and Avoidance 5, and then their attack is doled out according to what they roll. So we will go into depth into what these numbers and symbols mean during the gameplay. I chose our 5 characters randomly, and we have Elena Swan, Grandma Bates, Bernard Smith, Arnie Connors, and Peter Constant. Each of the characters has 4 of these cards with their name and picture on them, and these are their basic skill cards. And each player will also get 10 memory cards. 5 of them will have their name on them, like these do, Helena's memory. And then each of them will get memory strip cards numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These memory strip cards are the same for everybody, but the ones with their name on them are unique. Each of the memory decks will get shuffled and placed next to their character to create a draw pile. Of the 4 basic skills that each character starts with, you are allowed to choose 2 that you want, and then the other 2 will be turned face down and placed under your character card, and they can be gained later. To force myself to try different tactics, I always choose these randomly, so I'm going to do that for each player, and we'll go over each player's character here, talk about them, read the little bit of flavor text on them, and we'll see which basic skills I ended up with. I randomly chose 2 of their basic skills to start for each character, shuffled up their memory deck, and that character's memory deck is to the left of their character card, right there next to their photo. With the exception of Peter Constant, I just ran out of room, so his deck is going to be right here above him. And the remaining basic skills I put here in the bottom of the card holder, and we can earn those throughout the game. It's not something that needs to be right next to the character. Let's find out a little bit about each character, see which skills I ended up with, and we'll draw their mental disorder cards also, and gather their starting equipment. First up, we have Elena Swan. Elena Swan claims to have been born in 1774. She's able to talk about her life in Victorian England with astonishing detail. She suffers from photophobia and clinical vampirism, admitted to the asylum after being linked to several cases of cannibalism. Hellena suffers from schizophrenia and OCD. She starts with the gas pipe. Her imagination is 7, defense of 1, attack strength of 4, 10 health, and she gets 3 action points. Her special skill is Afterlife. After dealing a final blow to a monster, recover 1 health. That's a pretty good ability. Then we see her mental illness spot, and hers goes all the way up to 7, which is really good. We'll explain this throughout the gameplay. So we can see that she has schizophrenia and OCD. What we're supposed to do is draw 1 schizophrenia and 1 OCD, look at them, and then choose the one we want. As always, I like to do things randomly. I don't think that these characters would get to choose their mental illness. So let's just roll a die. We'll do 1 through 3 for schizophrenia and 4, 5, 6 for OCD. And it's going to be OCD. Draw and get Flash. It's a utility ability that costs nothing to use. When used, I can gain 1 action point and +1 defense for this round. That's quite useful. For her 2 basic starting abilities, she ended up with Hypnotizing Eyes. It's an attack, and we'll go over these symbols later. If this attack deals damage, you can move one space in any direction and recover a health. She has a lot of things to recover health. Very nice. And she also has Shadow Step, a utility power that costs none. Gain ethereal movement for this round. Wow, that's pretty cool. I'll explain what ethereal is when we go to use these powers. And she starts with a weapon, which is the gas pipe. It's a pretty dark picture. I don't know if you can see it. It just looks like a lead pipe. And it has an attack strength of 5, and it has 5 durability. Each player can have up to 6 skills and up to 4 items. Right now, Hellena has 3 skills, the Hypnotizing Eyes, Shadow Step, and Flash, and 1 item in the form of the gas pipe. If an item does not have any keywords like the gas pipe does not, then it's just a normal size item that counts as 1. There will be items that say large, that uses 2 of the 4 slots. There'll be items that say small. All the medications in the game are considered small, even if it's not on the card. But if it says small, it counts as 0 slots and doesn't count against those 4. And then some of the cards will say armor. Each character can only have 1 armor item at any given time. Even if it's not going to put them over the 4, they can still only have 1 armor. Here's our mini for Hellena. We'll put her in one of the padded cells to start the game. There are 9 solitary cells in the middle of the board. You can start in any of them. And you know me, I rolled a die and ended up with 2. Elena, with her yellow base, will start right there. Next up we have Grandma Bates. Grandma Bates was signed into the hospital by her lovely granddaughter. She has middle stage Alzheimer's, but she often talks to someone when there is nobody in the room. Staff has tried to contact her granddaughter for help, but they found out that she has been dead for several years. Grandma Bates' mental disorders are schizophrenia and phobia. She will start with a random weapon. She has 7 imagination, 0 defense, 5 attack, 6 health, and 2 action points. She is in a wheelchair. Each turn she gains 3 extra action points, but these action points are only usable for movement. And she cannot declare running. And I'll explain what running is. But let's get our random weapon and our mental disorder. It's either going to be schizophrenia or phobia. 1, 2, or 3 will be schizophrenia. And that's what she rolled. So she'll draw schizophrenia, gain faith healing, a utility power that costs 1 action point. When used, recover 4 health to a character within a range of 5. Wow. But they would have to be within line of sight. She also starts with a random weapon, as long as it's not one of the other characters' weapons, because there's only 1 of each in the deck. And it's a fire axe. Nothing's cooler than a character that's wheelchair bound wielding a fire axe. That's pretty sweet. The fire axe has a strength of 7. Costs 2 durability and 1 action to remove a door token from your space. So we could use the fire axe to break down doors, and we can break them down at a cost of 2. Normally it costs as much as the barricade is on the door itself. So if it's a really strong door, only paying 2 instead of 3, 4, 5, and so on, that can be quite useful if we get trapped. But we don't want to use that up. We want to use that fire axe as a weapon. That's strong. Let's get to roll 7 dice. Our other powers are Don't Hit the Old Lady. It's a defensive power that costs an ability point, or an action point. When used, gain stealth and avoidance 4 for the round. And she also has Drive Through, a utility power that costs 1 action point. When used, move 1 space in any direction and attack a monster on that space you arrive on with 8 dice. I forget what that is. I can't remember the name of it right now off the top of my head, but that allows you to knock down and push monsters if you don't kill them, and it also counts as a critical strike. Again, I'm saying a lot of stuff, but I'll explain it all during the gameplay. Here's Grandma Bates in her wheelchair. Does she have a cleaver there? What is that? Can't see through the camera. Grandma Bates with the purple base will start in that solitary confinement cell. Next we have Bernard Smith. Bernard Smith became a con artist early in his life. He has made a hobby of breaking out of jail. When at large, he goes on violent crime sprees with no regard to eluding the law enforcement. Transferred to the asylum after all hopes for re-socialization were lost. His mental disorders are aggression and OCD. He starts with the broken glass. He has an imagination of 6, defense of 1, attack of 5, health of 9, and 4 action points. His ex-con ability says you can leave spaces with monsters on them for 2 action points. Normally, if you're in a space with a monster, you can't leave, but he can spend 2 action points to do so. Alright, let's get his mental disorder, either aggression or OCD. Aggression will be 1, 2, or 3. And that's what he has. Coup de grace. Attack. 5 dice. Critical strike and precision. He also starts with broken glass. Allows him to roll 5 dice during attack. You can modify the result of 1 die by 1, and I believe that is up or down. And it has a durability of 5. The other abilities I ended up with: Prison Riot, an attack. It can do 10 dice plus fire, or an area of effect attack of 4 and fire. And the area of effect goes for each enemy in your space. And then again, I'll explain that when we get to that point. And he also has hit and run, an attack. It uses whatever weapon he has, and it gains a range of 2, I believe, is what that means, and an extra die. Here we have Bernard Smith. He is running. Bernard with the red base will start here. Arnie Connors. Arnie Connors was raised in a pathological environment of poverty and street gangs. To survive, he developed a dissociative persona, a cybernetic android disguised as a human being. His criminal record does state that he is, in fact, a killing machine. Mental disorders of aggression and anxiety neurosis. He starts with a club. He has an imagination of 5, a defense of 2, an attack of 3, which is really good. The lower the attack, the better. Health of 11, and action points 2. He has the nervous ability. He can lose 1 health to gain an additional action point once per turn. Alright, aggression or anxiety neurosis. Aggression will be 1, 2, or 3, and he will get anxiety neurosis. Foresight has a defense ability that costs none, and that gives him avoidance of 5 for the round. He starts with the club, an attack of 5 dice. You can lose 1 durability to add an additional die even after the attack roll. That's really nice that you can do it after the attack roll if you need that one last little bump. His additional abilities are Shockwave. It is an attack. 7 die with a range of 1, or an area of effect with range of 1. Oh, that's cool. If I'm reading that right, that means he can do an area of effect attack in a space away from him. And he also has Plow Through, a utility power that costs an action point. It allows him to move 3 spaces in any direction. Each enemy on the way, excluding the last space, is knocked down and stunned. Remove any revealed, locked, or barricaded door on your way, and lose 1 health for each door removed this way. So you can just plow through things. That's pretty apt for a guy that size, especially since he's a killing machine. Here's our big guy. Something about his background story and his sculpt seems familiar. Arnie with the orange base will start there. Our final character is Peter Constant. Peter Constant spent his childhood in a strictly Catholic foster home. As his mental disease progressed, he started to hallucinate angels and demons. To get rid of them, he studied exorcisms and occult. Held in the asylum due to multiple suicide attempts, mental disorder, schizophrenia, and anxiety neurosis. Starting equipment will be the wooden cross. He has an imagination of 7, defense of 1, attack of 4, health of 9, and 3 action points. His sharp mind ability. Your weapons have an extra die and +1 to their max durability. Schizophrenia or anxiety neurosis. Schizophrenia will be 1, 2, and 3. And that is what it is. Craziness Unleashed. Utility. Cost 1 ability point. Attack with a number of dice equal to the character's base max insanity. You can use 1 insanity to gain +1 to attack rolls. Can be used multiple times. And for Peter, his base max is 6. He also starts with a wooden cross, an attack of 4, and I believe that's holy. And it's pretty strong, a durability of 7. The random abilities I chose are Angel's Favor, utility, cost of 1. Put a holy token on any space. Characters on that space gain +1 defense and monsters gain -1 defense. There can only be 1 token on the board at a time. And the other random basic power is Lifelink, an attack. You use a weapon and you recover health equal to the damage dealt. I wonder if I still do the damage or if I just get the health. I'll have to look into that before I use it. Here is Peter with his wooden cross and what is probably the Bible. And Peter with the green base will be starting right there. Here is the first player token. I rolled a die to select randomly who the first player would be, and it is Peter. When the first player token passes to the right, which no one is to his right, we'll start back all the way over here with Hellena, and she will be our next first player. The game takes up a lot of space on the table since I'm using 5 characters. There's a lot of cards out here, so I had to shift things up a little bit. Can't keep it in a nice neat line like I usually do. I will zoom into the board where the action is and do overviews between rounds. We are ready to begin this 3-scenario playthrough with 5 players of Lobotomy.